What about announcements for SEA?
Oh.
Okay.
Let's do the fun part first.
Plus, I got it. I fixed it. I don't know what I did, but I fixed
SEA
it.
is fun.
That's right. I'm more excited. I'm sorry, Vaughn. I'm more excited about this because this was an idea that I had this morning in the shower because that's when I get all my ideas. Apparently. So, taking the survey information that you guys filled out yesterday. It's kind of funny. Justin made fun of me for my newfound love of word clouds, so I came up with something different. So for this, we are going to play Psych Feud. Seriously. Why? Just do it. Just do it. Hey, Wayne. Did anybody else have the fun of updating your laptop?
Yes, Dave.
Yeah.
It worked well, Dave.
Really?
What's your
I know, I'm working on it.
Let's have, why don't we have Vaughn?
Vaughn, why don't you go
Vaughn,
ahead?
SEA, please.
Please, the fun of SEA.
Nicole was, I just wanted to bring it up. Nicole was going to make the announcements about it.
It was, yeah. Okay, I know you guys are very interested. We resolved that the Seattle Education Association joined the national call for Black Lives Matter at School Week to kick off Black History Month during
Nicole?
February 5th to the
No,
11th.
it's okay.
Okay,
Keep going, Nicole.
sorry, go ahead.
So we're encouraging members to wear Black Lives Matter shirts to school that week and teach lessons that week about the school to prison pipeline, Black immigrant youth, Black women empowerment, Black LGBTQ community, and Black history.
What day is
Just
that?
so you know, February 5th to the 11th.
The first full week of February.
You're supposed to wear it every day?
Some
Wash
variant.
it in
Yeah.
Oh, one of the days.
I don't know, I mean, within reason.
Okay. I'm just checking
Kids
for
things don't
understanding.
wear it.
You can have a variety of t-shirt options.
I guess the other thing that I guess stood out to me was the bus drivers. We have to ask you guys to vote. Is that right? Do we do that via email?
There will, the union is wanting to seek confirmation from members.
A solidarity walkout in the event of a multi-day strike by school bus drivers. The walkout would take place during collaboration time on a Wednesday following the departure of the school buses for the day. You might ask why they'd be striking and there'd be departures of school buses. It's because they would hire, what do they call them? Scabs.
What's that word?
Authorization of a walkout will require a majority of the membership to vote in favor of the walkout.
And it isn't a walkout during the day, so no one would be losing time, or there'd be no pay risk. It's the idea of being in solidarity with the bus drivers. And
Yeah.
it's not the bus drivers versus the district, it's the bus drivers in connection with the corporation, which runs all kinds of transportation activities across the world. And
They own Greyhound and a bunch of others. Like, they're actually a multi-million-dollar business, and the SEA is saying that they can afford to give the bus drivers health insurance. And when you think about a bus driver's day, yeah, okay, maybe it is only 20 hours, but we're asking them to do it in chunks, and that really does affect their abilities. So that's, I think, why SEA is in support of
Their strike.
their strike. Yeah.
Okay.
Is there anything else that really needed to be?
Just the other piece is that there will be elections for the SEA leadership, and there will be elections for the conferences that happen both at the state level and at the national level. In the past, people have chosen to elect me. I am running again, so I can only invite you to consider me in that election process.
And then if you guys want to know more about the Seattle High Earners Income Tax thing that we're supporting, You can Google it or you can ask me, and I can try my best to explain it at another time.
Thank you. All right. I know. I don't know why there's an echo because I turned my volume off for years. So I need.
It's God.
I need 2 volunteers.
Could it be the light bulb?
Volunteers.
Only 2?
Yeah.
Is this
Thank you,
for-
Mr. Johnson. One more. Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. If we can get it to work. I'm gonna be so sad.
Oh no.
Oh, this is like a game?
I thought we just had to stand here, hopefully.
Where's their buzzers?
You gotta do the face off.
Nobody else watches Family Feud. Yes,
Not since the 70s. It's still on?
With Richard Dawson, not with,
Yeah. Old-time movies here. You're so clever.
You Google things, you Google Family Feud PowerPoint template, and look what you find. Yeah, so make sure you get the microphone. No, I don't have the volume up because it's just gonna reverberate more.
Hey, you can move the microphone.
They're off.
Maybe we should have
I remember Family Feud that I was listening to table, right? And there's a whole family behind you.
Okay.
No,
No, don't, what the heck?
Oh, no.
Don't look.
Yeah.
Show the question.
Yeah, it should be.
All right, don't look. Back there, at the audience.
You guys getting nervous?
You know, it's like you. All right.
Okay, so who are we gonna let go first? Ginger. Ginger. Sure. Oh, they have to buzz in? We don't have a buzzer. Okay. So based off of, interestingly, if you did watch it, you know that they sampled 100 people on the show, right? Which I was thinking, wow, that's not a really good end size. And then I'm like, whoa, Ashley, just back away from this stuff. Because when I was a kid, that sounded like a lot of people. And I'm like, they can't have a good p-value, right? It's not good. Okay. We did not have 100 respondents, but we're going to pretend we did. Based off of that, what is the activity that they chose to recharge their battery?
What
You
are the
gotta buzz in.
choices?
I'm not, no, you have to guess what it is.
Buzz in.
Exercising, boom.
Good answer, good answer. Good answer.
All right, family. Simple.
Okay, so who do you want to be members of
You
your
don't get a
family?
chance to-
Let's go be family members. All right,
Come, adopt a family. Come
Okay.
on. Any Oh, you mean what kind of exercise?
No.
No.
We have a category, so.
Reading.
Crocheting. Oh, these are reading.
Well, there's only one question, right?
So people that said knitting, art, painting, arts and crafts.
But she didn't say that. No. We were just giving her her answer.
Okay, this is not Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. We don't have time to find
All right.
answers.
Yeah, reading is what I said.
Is that a good?
Well, she said, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yay.
Meditating. Well, maybe.
Good answer. Meditating.
Try to do wrong.
Meditating.
Okay, we'll go with meditating.
So now it's Sam's turn. We lose a turn.
Okay, the S. Okay, now you.
Come on, be his family.
Yeah.
I think we're adapting.
Come on, Sissy, be his family. Yeah. Good answer.
Napping, sleeping.
Sleeping.
Is this to recharge your battery? Okay.
That's my
Are we
answer.
concerned that she got the first top three answers?
Sleepy.
He said sleeping.
I'm trying to remember which one is which.
Oh, there it is. It's on there. That means it's on there. Oh,
I should have written this down. Okay, now who's in your family? Are they in your family too?
It's the same family.
It's
Good answer. Good answer.
Okay.
Cooking.
Say cookie bee.
Baking.
Good answer.
We heard you. Okay, we gotta go traveling.
Okay, so are you my, oh, so now it's my turn. I'm gonna say traveling. My family supports me in that.
How about?
It's okay, family.
Come back to me.
We can steal it.
Now you can steal it.
Okay. Yes, yes. Good answer.
He said,
Retail therapy.
I love that it like you still get 3 X's. This is a flaw that I like to discover.
spending time with family.
Family.
Oh, yeah.
Nature.
Is that how we do it?
Spending time with
Family.
family.
Yeah, just put socializing. Yeah, spending time with. All right.
Okay, so who won?
Well,
Okay, so you know you're a school psychologist when these are the leftovers from your stocking stuffers for your children. Fidgets. So Gary, I had to get some of these because Danny likes these a little too much.
They're amazing.
They are amazing. It's a fidget that does not make noise and does not make a mess. So you can get one of these. This is more of the kind that like Alina would like. Or I have some iPad stylus. So all of our participants can choose one parting gift. Thank you so much. So every month we're going to do a game like sharpening the saw or rejuvenating our battery or whatever thingy. So what am I going to come up with next time? I don't know.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Wheel of Fortune next time.
I have an announcement. So, Dr. Sue is not going to continue as team lead after this year, so we will be on the road. It was all part of her plan, though.
Where's the boo thing?
It was all part of her plan. So, first off, I wanted just to thank her because she's been awesome in that role.
I do have just a few words to say because I know I'm going to get very emotional about this. So it has been a privilege for me to serve you as a team leader. I decided to apply for this position almost 3 years ago because I wanted to give back what many of you had given to me to help me to become a better, a more proficient, distinguished school psychologist and to grow professionally. I did not expect to learn more in the last 2 years than I had in the previous 10 years, especially from my wonderful fellow team leads. They are truly amazing. This position has also allowed me to get to know you better and to make me feel truly belonging to this wonderful professional community. It takes a lot out of me every time for me to stand in front of you, but I force myself to do it every time, so I know you can do it too. And so I really want to encourage all of you to seriously consider applying for this position. Okay, thank you.
So with that, if you're kind of new to this process, we'll be sending out some additional information around it as well. But it really is an opportunity that's open to our group, and it really works because we have a variety of different team leaders that bring a lot of different perspectives to that, and support from all of you as well in kind of informing the direction of our practice, the deliberations that we have, and kind of the reorganization that we've been going through over the last several years. And so I can say that, where we are feels really good. I mean, it feels like we are kind of building on a lot of the feedback from this group around communication. How can we increase our communication? What are opportunities for that? It's building on a lot of our work of providing additional opportunities, both kind of internally for what we look at. So I would just say, if you think that it might be of interest, ask people who have been team leaders before or are team leaders right now. Get more information around it. It definitely is a commitment. It is a very large commitment. There's a lot of time allocated to it, and it's not enough time to do a lot of the work, right? And we all know that. Same is true for the work in the buildings as well, or in different assignments as well. So I would say this is different work, and depending on where your passions may lie with it, it might be a good fit for you to pursue. So do take it seriously, and I would encourage people to ask the questions that they need to see if that might be a good fit for them, and talk to people who've done it before. So looking at a few down here too.
Can I add a logistical piece?
Please.
So logistics-wise, because I'm the interview lady, we're going to be looking at doing team lead interviews in February. So start thinking now if this is something that you want to pursue. And then by May, probably try to do some onboarding. It's complicated because we want the person coming on to have, be able to see kind of the process of what's happening and get some training before they're actually starting in September in this new huge role, but also recognizing that you still have your building obligations to fulfill. So we want to make that kind of overlap onboarding manageable.
And also part of that is trying to get, because each individual who might prospectively be looking at this will bring a different skill set prospectively than Dr. Sue does. And so it's also an opportunity, because we really do function as a team entity, right? So there might be a reshuffling of kind of priorities amongst that team based on where your skill set, if as that team leader comes on board. So that's part of why we want the lead time, just so that we can make sure everyone's really clear what responsibilities they're taking over and kind of managing, recommending towards.
So what's the process? Do people need to fill out an application and write a letter, or?
Yeah, it's the same process as before.
So as of right now, it's not an official position in like NeoGov where you go to apply. I'm having word retrieval, but it's a less extensive process. You would just submit your letter of interest and your resume, and then 3 professional references.
So there is still a formal interview process, and so it's just not bound by the exact same process and procedure of kind of a NeoGov application and entries, right?
Internal.
Correct. It's more of an internal hiring process for our department.
Yeah, and like Spencer said, you don't have to just think of replacing Pei-Ling and what exactly she's doing. Or some will renegotiate roles. So if you have other strengths that you're bringing to the table, apply. But we're still going to contract with Pei-Ling to do some stand-up comedy for them.
Yeah.
Are you going to teach William how to do the agendas?
Finally, my other point. My only other point.
Did you ask, is he going to do it, or
If
are we going to?
you don't necessarily feel like, hey, I want to take this on, but you think of somebody else in your peer group that you think would be a really great team lead, have a chat with them, maybe encourage them, right, as part of this group. Because sometimes we ourselves might not consider it, but if somebody else really sees that you're fit and tells you, that could be really encouraging.
Are there any prerequisites to this job? Like,
You
have to have been a psychologist for 3 or 5 years,
Right.
or?
You have to have a
As of right
2.4
now, I don't think we've
GPA.
made experience limits, because there are sometimes when we have new people or people that are new to Washington, it still gives a really good perspective. I think that's something that would sort of come out in the interview process and in the consideration of the selection. But obviously, you need to be overall compliant with your evaluations, not be on a personnel improvement plan, those kinds of things.
So think about it as what's the support that you really are seeing from your team leads, right? And what do you expect in terms of support or the work that team leads are doing, and see if that's the type of commitment that you think somebody else might be able to fulfill. So I guess thinking about those things, one, are they somebody that's approachable, right? or do you see yourself as approachable? And, so if you're not connected, I guess, with this larger group, it could be pretty challenging to be a team leader. If you don't have a real kind of some clarity around some things that you're passionate about, it could make trying to divvy up what you're going to pursue a little bit more challenging. So, do you feel pretty well grounded in your own practice that you can give advice or recommendation, or at least direct people towards the appropriate channel to get that information? Do you feel like you have something that you really like? Are you really passionate about adding something to this to elevate the practice for our group, right? And are you ready to try something different? So add a couple of these different things together and see if that sounds interesting to you.
Do you have to give up your school?
Depends on your school.
What if
right?
you had a 1.0 school?
We need a special,
I was allowed to.
Yeah.
I was allowed to split mine.
So if that's the case, you can split your school. So,
You still can keep your same school, but you will have you will still 0.6 at the same school, and then someone else will take over the 0.4.
It's one of the few.
Yes.
options for that.
Exceptions. Yes.
No, I asked the same question.
Yes, there's a stipend as well. It's
You do not
entirely
get
why
it
all
in
team
the
leaders do
summer.
this work.
FYI.
It's $300.
I found out
for each
after the
deadline.
first summer. Not gonna respond to those emails anymore.
It's $333 a month for 9 months.
I think that you're like $20 too high on that, but yeah.
Oh, really?
Whatever it is. Yeah. That's about what career you get too, you know.
So we have our presenters here today. And Tiffany will introduce this wonderful group of people.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we do have one. Do you guys want to start on that, or? It's usually what we want. Okay, if you'd like to.
So they know, okay, so they know what their program is.
So we can take a 5 minutes break right now? Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right. We have 5 minutes to figure out.
Yeah, 5 minutes to figure out.
So if I pause, I don't know if it'll let me pause. 'Cause I think that we can not.
So these folks came here today from NAMI to do a presentation for us. So we've got Nina, Alex, and Gideon. And Gideon will just be kind of part of the group observing. So hope you guys enjoy it.
So we normally do this for high school and middle schoolers, so I'm gonna be going through the slideshow pretty quickly. Can you guys hear me okay? I really don't like mics. Yeah. Okay, good. It always makes me feel like there's more going on than there really is. Anyway, so I'm just gonna go through the slideshow pretty quickly. This is what we generally show to the high school and middle schoolers. It gives a good information. There's a few videos here that talk about mental illness and the struggles of it. It points out the statistics of 1 in 5 adults and 1 in 4 teens that struggle with mental illnesses. And what's helpful about the videos is that it's done by high schoolers, so they get to feel a little bit of a connection to the people that are talking. It's not just a bunch of adults telling them how they should feel and what mental health should feel like. It's coming from others that have felt the same way. The intro kind of talks about what mental health is, reminding them that it is not their fault. It is not anything anyone has brought upon themselves. Mental health is just like physical health. It is something that just happens, or things that we're born with, and it gets treated. There are treatments, and almost every mental health condition has a treatment. And then we tell them more about how they can become a friend, how they can be an ally for mental health, teaching them to speak up about it. So this particular video, do we have sound? Yes. Go through. Sorry. Sorry. I won't be going through the exact same talking points as I would for the kids, because I want to make sure that they are able to tell their stories. Sorry. I do want to make sure that you guys are able to see at least one or two. Had
No, it's just that. No, you're fine. Sorry.
Oh, okay, cool. What was I saying? Right. So her friend has a mental health condition, and she felt like she was kind of going out of control and not able to get herself back to a stable state. And while she was driving 60 on a residential. Obviously, you can't drive 60 on a residential. She ended up hitting a speed bump, losing control, and going right into a lake. So these are some of the examples I would give the kids of what it means to have extreme risky behaviors. So using drugs and alcohol or prescription drugs without the prescription or without the directions that are told. I'm hoping this video works. Yes, it is. Cool. These are one of the other videos, again, encouraging them to speak up and that they are not alone. No.
Well, so the problem is we can't do both. We can't.
Hospital, all those things really trigger negative feelings. So instead, you want to ask it directly. Are you wanting to commit? Or sorry, did it myself. Are you wanting to are you wanting to take your life? And it's really hard to find the right phrasings. I've been obviously trying to find the right way to say it. Saying things like, are you trying to hurt yourself, could still imply cutting and not suicide. So again, you want to use the word. You want to ask, are you wanting to kill yourself? And then obviously making sure that they don't keep it a secret. Now that they know how they can get better or how they can get treatment. So there are some kids that feel that we're talking directly to them, but then the question comes of, well, what can I do? I know I feel this way. I know these things. I know the warning signs, but what can I do? And so we encourage them to find treatment because it is treatable. To talk to their counselors, to talk to their teachers, to look for other ways of treatment, so other forms of therapy. And during this time, I usually ask kids, what are coping skills? What are your coping skills? And I give them the scenario of, you just took a test, you don't know how you feel about that test. You don't know what's gonna happen. You go home, your mom's mad because you didn't take out the trash. Your best friend is mad at you because you were supposed to meet up for something and you forgot because you were worried about the test. all of these things are happening right now and you're gonna feel very overwhelmed. How do you deal with it? What is your coping skill? And they name out a lot of random things, which is great. I want them to think about out-of-the-box coping skills. Some of them say things like talk to my mom, I watch TV, and watching TV is perfectly fine. There's a presenter who was telling me about how she only learned about anxiety because she was watching reality TV, and they were talking about anxiety and someone and how they felt and what it was. And the only reason they realized how what they were feeling was anxiety is because they were just happened to watch TV because they wanted to just kind of let out some steam. So I encourage them to tell me random coping skills, whatever you can think about. And then that also helps other students think about coping skills. They might not have a quick idea at the moment, but if their classmate has an idea, then they can bounce off of each other and continue to share. Too early. So some of the coping skills they've named in the past were like getting some sleep, exercising, writing in a journal, joining a club. And I always ask what kind of clubs are in your school. Do you guys already have a club? Is there something that your counselor already has? Is the nursing office a place you can be? Is it, and then encouraging them to start their own clubs. It could be something simple as like coming together in a classroom during lunch just to eat lunch. Because I don't know if you guys remember high school, but lunchtime was one of the most just like, I don't know what to do because the cafeteria is huge, it's loud, there's a lot of people. Who do I eat lunch with? And unfortunately, those are one of the times that it's like make or break your high school status or whatever, trying to figure out who to sit with and who to eat lunch with and who to talk with. So if they could have a place to be during those lunch times, just sitting at a teacher's office or hanging out in a courtyard with a group of other people and let it be just a lunch club or whatever you want to call it. Before this was changed, when I first started, there was about like 2 people that I recognized in this like people that can succeed list. And now I'm so glad to say that there are so many more people, not just people that we can recognize, but people of color. Unfortunately, when we first started doing this, there weren't that many people of color. There was like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with DMX. He was like the only one there. So I was like, no, let's have other representation, please. But now we have Kerry Washington, who struggles with binge eating. Adam Levine, who struggles with ADHD and is still on The Voice, making it. Margaret Chow, who's a comedian and who talks a lot about her mental health in her comedy. So this is just trying to emphasize that having a mental health condition isn't going to hold you back. It isn't going to make you less of a person. Obviously, these people have made it, and there are hundreds and thousands of other people who have as well. So in the end, I just kind of wrap it up and ask them like how they can be a friend, and they can see the slide, but this is a moment where I just ask them questions and ask them what they have learned from this presentation. And this is, I'm hoping this will work. No, it's not. Can we just move on? Are you guys all right with that? Okay. And then how they can reduce stigma. A club is one of the things that I really like for them to try and start, or at least think about. But how they can reduce stigma. Go home and talk to your parents about this. Go home and tell them, hey, I had this presentation. There was this person that came up and told me about these stories. If you just talk about it, it is a better way to acknowledge it and reduce stigma. So, and then I give them the okay to talk, which is another text line. I found that texting is a lot easier. They are more responsive to texting than they are just calling somebody. I don't know what it is about calling, but they don't want to. Texting is just a lot easier. You can formulate your words. And then the last thing on there is wearing lime green. Red being for HIV, AIDS, pink being for breast cancer, lime green is for mental health. And
way to represent one.
And then making sure that people continue to talk about it and know that it is not your fault. Anything that happens with your mental health condition is not something you brought onto yourself. It's not something you should be ashamed of. It's not something you should hide. Talk about it. Talk to people. You are not alone. So let's end the silence. And we're going to end the silence by letting them tell their stories.
So did you want me to use this now, or are you guys still okay?
The back.
Can you guys hear?
As long as you project.
Okay. Let me know if you have a hard time hearing me.
Thank you, John.
Okay, so my name is Alex. I'm 25 years old. I'm currently a bartender here in downtown Seattle. I'm from San Diego originally. I came up here about 1.5 years ago. I'm actually going to be moving back to San Diego soon to spend time with my family and then focus on school, which has taken me a while to figure out because I've been working for the past 5 years. I've always had an interest in psychology, and I actually decided to become a school psychologist. So that's why I'm excited to be here and present to you guys.
Stay in Washington.
You guys are my heroes. You're what I want to be when I grow up. So I've done a lot of volunteer work in the past few years to figure out what I wanted to do. I worked at a domestic violence shelter and rape crisis hotline for a little while, for about 1.5 years. I've been working with NAMI for a few years, doing a bunch of their programs, doing presentations. I was also volunteered for a organization called Crisis Text Line. Does anyone know about Crisis Text Line? A few people. Is I guess sort of like Teen Links. It's like a texting service that it's aimed at younger kids, like teens and young adults, where they can just text basically for free for most cell phone providers. It's free. It's 741-741, and they can text a trained crisis counselor, which is what I did, and they can just talk to them about anything, whether it's they're having suicidal ideation, self-harm, they're having relationship problems, school problems, bullying, LGBT questions. It's just completely free. They can text them, and then we'll give them resources and then calm them down through the situation they're going through. And then that's some of my volunteer experience. And then so my story, I first started experiencing anxiety when I was in about 5th grade, anxiety and depression. And before 5th grade, I was very social. I had lots of friends. I played lots of sports. I had really good grades. Then all of a sudden things just started changing. I started losing my friends. My grades started dropping. I was isolating a lot more. I started gaining weight as well, and I got teased a little bit on that weight over the next few years, and it made my low self-esteem become even lower. And then I remember in 7th grade, I had my first thought of wanting to die. It wasn't like suicidal ideation, but I remember I just didn't feel like I belonged there, and I'd rather be dead. My mom sort of noticed this change in my personality, but she wasn't sure what it was. She didn't know anything about mental illness. I wasn't really taught it in school either. So she just told me it was a phase. It was something that I was just going to get over. And so I just listened to her like, okay, this is going to just eventually work itself out. But in my case, it was something that should have been intervened sooner. So that continued through high school. Things just kept getting worse and worse. I had a hard time in high school. I had a lot of anxiety and depression, so it was hard to meet people, talk to people. I liked sports, but I liked football and soccer. Those are team sports. You kind of need to be social to succeed in those. So my thoughts and feelings just kept getting worse and worse. So an example of what my thoughts were every second of every day were, you're fat, you're useless, you're ugly, you're pathetic, you don't belong here, nobody wants you. Those thoughts were just on repeat in my head, and I couldn't shut them off. One of the ways I tried to combat that was through video games. When I came home from school, I just played video games until I fell asleep, just a way to disconnect myself from what I was experiencing. But it didn't always work, so I started a negative coping mechanism of self-harming. Got to the point where I was doing it at school, at work. I always had something on me to harm myself, and it just made things even worse. It made my self-esteem even lower, and it got to the point where it just made me it started making me think about suicide more and more. I became obsessed with it, always thinking about it all of the time. And eventually it got to the point that I was very close, so I called a suicide hotline. Some cops came and picked me up, and then I was in the hospital for about 3 or 4 weeks in a mental health institution. They tried me out with some medications and therapies, and then they sort of just let me go. The medications were working, and when medications start working, you feel better. You don't feel like you need them anymore, so I stopped taking them. But that was a terrible idea because everything just came back with a vengeance. And I attempted suicide with a large amount of pills I'd acquired. And I was unconscious for 2 days and I had my stomach pumped. My mom told me the parents said if they had found me 15 minutes later, I probably wouldn't have made it. So at that point, I knew I had to accept my mental health issues. I had to accept my anxiety, my depression, and my body dysmorphia. I'm sure all of you know what body dysmorphia is, but I go through it and tell the kids like it's a body image disorder where the person who is affected by it is never happy with their body, no matter what they do or what people say. They're just always, they feel negative about their body. Towards the end of high school, I was working out about 4 or 5 hours a day for 6 days a week for a year and a half. No matter what my body looked like, I was never happy. I was never content. No matter what people told me, I just was never happy with it. With my anxiety, my first job was at a restaurant, and I was just, a host, a busser. That's not that bad, but I eventually got offered to start serving. When you serve, you talk to 100 people in a single night. I was fucking terrified. I wouldn't say that word, but I was terrified. It was like a unplanned exposure therapy for myself. I didn't mean to do it. The therapist didn't tell me to do it. It just happened. And now I'm a bartender. I just talk to people all night. I still don't like it, but I'm able to do it. Yeah, so after my second hospitalization, my doctor sat me in front of my parents and my brother and essentially just told me, you're about to kill yourself. You're going to have these people who love you deal with your decision for the rest of your life. And I knew that's when I had to begin my recovery process. Recovery is not something that happens overnight or even within a few weeks or months. It's something that could take years, like it has for me. One of the things I participated in was ECT. I'm sure a lot of you know what ECT is, electroconvulsive therapy. I tell the kids that it's a procedure where they send electrical current through your brain while you're under anesthesia, and it essentially just resets the neurons in your brain. Neurons like dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin that affect a lot of mental illnesses, and it sort of gives your body a chance to reset, and you can use it with medications or therapies to sort of reset the neurons to get it just right for what you need to be able to succeed and help you with whatever you're going through. They also couple that with medications and then DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, which was I loved it. I learned the practice of mindfulness, which I wish was taught in schools more, especially for younger children. It was a game changer for me. I still don't understand why it's not taught in schools. It's crazy. But it's affected my life so much differently. Depression is when you dwell on the past. Anxiety when you worry about the future. It teaches you about living in the current moment, not stressing too much about things that had happened or haven't happened yet. Let's see what else. I mean, I've accomplished a lot. I pay my own bills. I have my own job. Have my own car and motorcycle. I moved up to Seattle not knowing a single person having a job set up or anything. I was able to do that. And I figured out what I want to do with my life, so I think I've done a pretty good job. So, thank you.
Bright lights. My name's Nina. I'm not intending on being a school psychologist, but my mom was. So I get claps too. I'm a nurse. I work night shift. I just got off a night shift like a couple hours ago. So this presentation will be interesting. Let's see. I work at a addiction recovery unit, and I also work at a eating disorder residential house for teenagers. So I get interact with a lot of teens, and definitely love what you guys are doing. All about that. I moved up from Arizona 5 years ago to go to school here, get my nursing degree, and let's see, growing up, my family, they're really great. They, like I said, my mom's a school psychologist. My brother is a philosopher, so kind of similar in a way. So my family's got a decent understanding of mental illness, but even then, it's different every time. And our family was never, even though we probably had like the head knowledge, we were never very good at talking about difficult stuff, talking about our feelings, talking about especially like sadness and anger. And I especially always felt a lot of emotion, felt a lot for other people, just felt things really strongly. But I have a great poker face, so whether I want to or not. So people never really knew when I was feeling those things, especially the negative emotions. And it just became practice to not talk about it, not ever address it. I didn't understand it. No one else knew that I wasn't feeling good some of the time. So it just started a pattern of dishonesty, really. And I was kind of similar to him. My childhood, I was happy and carefree, but for me it was puberty and some family stuff at the same time hit me really hard all at once, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Thought it was just all in my head, that I was being a drama queen, and just having trouble understanding all the shit that happens in the world, really. And so I didn't talk about that. I just, thought it was my problem to deal with and figure out, and bottled it up. And as those things happened, it just had to burst out. Had to figure out some way to deal with it. Didn't have a whole lot of like good coping strategies, because we don't learn those in school. And so I chose some negative coping strategies. Self-injury, definitely thinking a lot about death, but not to the point of any plan, just like very comfortable with the idea of me not being there. And just kind of went through middle school, high school, was athletic, played sports, got along fine with people, did pretty good in school, kind of flew under the radar, like people didn't think I was functioning, so they didn't think anything was wrong. And it was okay. I had periods of, looking back, probably just episodes of depression, and then I'd come out of it and think, okay, I'm good, no big deal. That was just a phase. And I really chose, so I moved out after I graduated high school, chose to go to school in Seattle to get away from Arizona, and start over, blank slate, all that jazz. And it worked. I found a group of people I really felt comfortable to be open with my emotions and who understood like the crazy side and the dark side and all that. And for a while it was just fantastic, but unfortunately sometimes life gets in the way, and for us it was a school shooting where one of my friends was shot and killed, and suddenly everything I knew was kind of torn apart, and I was left, like, all of us were left trying to deal with something that, like, our friends and family didn't really understand, and this whole loss of, like, safety, and I also felt kind of the nurse brain. I felt a lot of guilt that, looking back now, while I still struggle with, like, it's not your fault that he died, and it wouldn't have made a difference if you were there. But in my mind, like, the whole chain of events could have gone so much differently if I had just done something else. And I kind of shoved a lot of just processing grief and violence, crisis, shoved a lot of that away because suddenly all my friends were trying to figure this out too. And so I did the nurse thing and I took care of them and I didn't deal with my own emotions. And so my body figured it's gonna make me start dealing with them. And months went by and I was still stuck in that day, in that moment. I was super on edge. I was super anxious, having nightmares and just like really, really exhausted all the time, but also having these periods of intense panic. And I didn't get it. I thought I was just overreacting to the event. Like, I should have been able to deal with it, press on, whatever. I didn't understand how post-traumatic stress disorder works, and that it's not just for when you go to war. And it eventually took me a couple different teachers who had noticed I was in nursing school at that point, just like fully throwing myself in because the moment I got off of my clinicals and out of school, it was back to that day. So I would dread the weekends, I would dread any sort of break. And then clinicals became harder and sitting in class became really hard because it's crowded and there's so many people around you and the exits are really, really far away and you can't keep track of everything. And so yeah, eventually a couple teachers noticed, and one of them, my first quarter in nursing school, sat down with me and she's like, look, you gotta work through this because if you don't, it's just gonna get worse. And she said, you can't take care of people if you have all this stuff going on. So that was like a little bit of a ultimatum, because I wanted to be a good nurse. I wanted to be able to care for people, as I'm sure you guys do. And so it still took me like 3 or 4 months to go to the student counseling center. There was a couple of times that I'd like go to the door and it would be like, okay, I can't do this. And I think one day it just was too intense and too much emotion, and I was like, okay, I know I can't do this on my own. I think it's time to actually ask for help. And so I went to our school counseling center, sort of like the school psychologist. It was my first really good decision. and they, because they're there for the event that happened, they were so good at working with me to sort through my memories, sort through other things that had happened in my life, traumas kind of compounding on each other that I didn't, the memories are all like twisted up in my brain. So I didn't see the connections until like I sat down and talked about it with someone else. And I also got started on some medications, which I pretty much took straight on through. Had some dose adjustments, but antidepressant that helps with PTSD and just allowed me a little bit of distance from my memories, so that I could like sort them out while sort of being away from them, because there was just so much emotion associated with them that I wasn't able to pull myself away. And those two things, going to the counseling center, getting medications, really helped me understand that it wasn't just in my head. Like it's a thing that happens. It's a disorder with biological components and environmental components, and it's not my fault. And I'm still constantly trying to remind myself that. And especially on the days where I just don't want to get out of bed, or the days that I am thinking way too much about how it would have been better if I was dead and that person wasn't. That I just gotta remember that everything, that I'm like working towards something too. And I've been learning how to talk to my family and friends about just about like emotions I'm feeling as I'm feeling them. And they a lot of times are able to help me find some positive coping strategies, because in the past I would just turn again and again to the negative coping skills, which of course, they're a spiral. So they help me find the positive ones, because I'm not able to, when I'm in those moments of panic or whatever, I'm not able to think at all. So I needed friends, I needed parents, teachers alongside me that could be like, look, maybe you should try this right now. And I graduated school and I started being in the working world, and some of the PTSD symptoms kind of came back now that I suddenly had like not all the sort of free time, and also because I'm working with a heavily traumatized population, so some of their traumas will trigger mine. So I returned to, I did a brief intensive exposure therapy for PTSD last year, which helped address a lot of those symptoms and finally allow me to go back to what happened on that day that I couldn't process and couldn't forgive myself for, and be able to go back there and kind of sit in those memories, not be able to avoid them. And that ultimately, along with the support of a therapist and a good social support, was what I needed to be able to continue recovering. And right now I'm looking at going back to therapy for more mood symptoms. And it's not as scary as it was to start off with. It's still like taken me a really long time to do anything about it, but that's okay. And I am engaged, and that's exciting. I never thought that would. You guys are funny. I never thought that would happen to me. So yeah, things are good. And I just, yeah, like I mentioned, I had some really good teachers and counselors step in my life when I didn't see a way out. So just encourage you guys, like what you do really matters. So thank you.
I guess I'm gonna have to shorten mine real quickly then. That's all good. It happens. So I am a recent UW graduate. My mom is from Somalia, which was a war-torn country, and we came in this country when I was about 4 years old, and I started going to school in the States, and I didn't really do well with that because my mom would always speak Somali or Arabic in our home, and those were the languages that I knew. So going to school was like this whole other thing of how do I talk to these people? And when I was younger, I never knew that I had social anxiety. It took me a long while to figure out what social anxiety is and what it feels like. But to give an example, I would always tell the kids, I don't know if you guys are familiar with memes, but I love memes. And there's this one particular meme of Homer Simpson backing up into a bush and completely disappearing. And that is something that I've always wished that I could have. And if I could have one superpower, it'd be instant invisibility. It's just like, I'm done, bye. So I grew up with these feelings of my palms being sweaty, my stomach always feeling like it's turning, and I constantly feel nauseous and want to throw up, but I don't know how to explain that to my mom. My mom grew up in a war-torn country. She grew up trying to make sure that we were alive. Her country was beautiful, everything was great, obviously well before the war. So what she knew was not this country. What she knew was not this culture. So when she came here, her mission was get the kids to school, find a job, have a home, make sure everything's going fine. And my siblings became the ones to interpret, to do all of the things for my mom. She would basically go to places and then drag me and my siblings along and say, tell them that thing that they're doing, it's stupid. Translate, do it. And I'd end up having to be there and be like, they don't like it. You say these things. And so growing up with social anxiety and having a mother who's very headstrong and very aware of her culture and who she is was extremely difficult for me. I'm a person who I don't know who I am still, and I don't know how I feel about a lot of things, and it takes me a while to process those emotions. Just the thought of coming here today, talking to, I'm sure, a bunch of very nice people who understand that it sucks to talk in front of people, but I still felt nervous. So it was hard for me to tell my mom this is how I was feeling, because to her it was, are you hurt? Is there something wrong? Are you broken right now? No? Then you're fine. And so to tell her that, oh, I don't want to go to school because the lunch you gave me kind of smells funny, and then I'm going to have to sit in front of people, and that makes me really nervous, and I don't like it, and I start crying, because that is my response to this nervous feeling, is just crying. And so my mom would get very, very frustrated and be like, why are you crying? Mental health is not something that is very prominent in our culture. Mental health in East African culture is lumped in with having a disability, being deaf. It's all just lumped together because mainly there was no help for those people. There aren't a lot of people who sign. There aren't a lot of people who know Braille. There aren't a lot of people who understand mental health from, they don't know the difference between just being anxious or having schizophrenia. To our culture, unfortunately, that entire thing is lumped into one. So it is hard for me to tell my mother, I am nervous to go to school. I am nervous to talk to people because I have a thick accent, and I got my accent from you. I'm nervous to tell people my full name because they're not going to be able to pronounce it, and they're going to stare at that paper and try to call attendance, and then I'm just going to have to be like, just say Mina. It's Mina. It's fine. Just call me Mina. And again, it comes back to my mom being so headstrong, being like, if they can learn to pronounce things, they can learn to pronounce your name. And I don't know if you guys saw a video from this actress who's in Orange is the New Black. Her name is this is terrible, I'm butchering it already, talking about mispronouncing names. But she has a very distinctive African name. And her mom told her if they can pronounce Chofsky and Nomsky, and they can learn to pronounce those, they can learn to pronounce yours. So that is the ideas that my mom was trying to instill in me, but that wasn't working because I suffered from social anxiety. I would much rather curl up in bed than have to ever talk to people, because in my mind, all I could see is eyes staring at me and judging me and telling me, oh, your clothes aren't right, the way you pronounce that isn't right. And a lot of my fears came in with just being an immigrant, and that sucks, but that's how kind of life works. My English was terrible. I had an accent. I said things or ate things or dressed in ways that weren't normal, so I didn't want to be in school. This took a long while for me to figure out, but by the time I was in college, I met other people that were also Somali, and that was easier for me to talk to them and talk to them about how I feel. And we had those moments of, you know, how whenever you meet somebody where you have a click and you're just like, oh my God, me too, yes! And that is the click that I had. And that person told me how they have social anxiety and how not being able to understand the English language and pronounce things made her nervous. It was the reason why it took her so long to even learn English. And so I talked to my mom and was like, hey, I think I have social anxiety. I don't know what this is. And again, my mom was like, are you broken? You're not broken? Then you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. And I talked to counselors and teachers, and it came back to teachers being the person to go to. And not because they understood, not because they knew what I was going through, or they knew my culture, or they knew any of that. It was simply because they sat down and they listened. And I was able to just tell them, like, hey, I feel nervous just walking through the hallway. And now my grades are dropping because I'm late to class, even though I'm in school, but I'm afraid to go out in the hallway because there's too many people right now. So I have to wait. I'm gonna wait until after the bell. And telling them these things helped me figure out what we could do. Honestly, if it weren't for talking to a counselor, if it weren't for talking to teachers, I wouldn't figure out not only what I was going through or how we could cope with it. A lot of people talked about coping skills, and that is a new term to me. I mean, I've always used coping skills, I just didn't know what they were. And during the presentations, I always like to keep reminding the kids, what are your coping skills? Or asking them, what coping skills do you use? Or do you know what a coping skill is? And finding a coping skill and finding alternate routes is what gave me the courage to be able to go on with my life and do normal things and talk to people and not feel like they're judging me. I had to keep reminding myself that, yes, they don't understand your culture. Yes, you are going to mess up your words. You are going to fumble, but it is okay because they are not seeing that. It is you seeing that. So I have to keep reminding myself these small things, but I wouldn't have been able to even think about it if I didn't have a teacher tell me, what are your coping skills? So I'm able to continue to recover right now. And like they said, recovery is not an ending road. It is not one and done and you're finished. It is continuing and ongoing, and it takes the help of you guys to help someone go through their recovery moment. So today I'm feeling better because of people like you. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Any questions?
Yes.
So when you do this presentation, do you have a preferred size of group of students that you talk to?
We're usually told ahead of time. I'm corresponding with the teacher that's setting this up, so I generally know how big it's gonna be. Not too long ago, we did Holy Name Academy where there was 5 sets that we were doing of 50 girls. So it can be large, it can be small, it really depends.
And about how long is it, your presentation?
It is a 50-minute in total, including questions and answers. 25 minutes presentation, so my portion would have been a lot longer, including the videos and all. And then 10 minutes of a presenter talking. You guys got the luxury of having 3 presenters right now.
Thank you.
And probably our preferred size is like a normal classroom. I've done like auditoriums, that's scary. We don't.
Yeah, it depends on the presenter because I don't really mind, but that's why usually when we get the initial like request, the program coordinator will say like, this is how many. If you feel comfortable, let me know and we'll set you up. So.
I just want to say thank you for sharing the really deeply personal stories and coming in and being vulnerable. I know I can relate to a lot of what you're saying. I'm assuming that a lot of people in this room can relate to. And it's really scary. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to remind everybody, if you have more questions, you can ask, but there's an evaluation form, right? You would like us to complete, and please take a copy and complete it, and then turn it in to Amina. Yeah, okay. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, John?
You were talking about setting up clubs in schools.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering, do you have any suggestions for names for clubs?
Yeah, there's a kid suggested sit in. They also suggested chill out. Just random names that they were just saying like, oh, it's a time to just sit in and chill out. So why not just call it that? And then they ask your students. They have great ideas. Whenever I talk or ask these questions, they come up with so many different ideas, things that I would never even have thought of. But one of the clubs that I heard was chill out, and I thought that was really cool.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, I think they are busy filling out the evaluation form.
Thank you.
Yeah.